everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here more and more with Kevin Noon. Kevin, how's it going?
It's going. What a day, especially for Ryan Day. The fruits of the labor sometimes can be really sweet, and I think that's the case right now for Ryan Day, as he not only works to reassemble his coaching staff, but he's found himself a nice little payday.
Yeah, gets a contract extension. The new deal takes him through the 2031 season at $12.5 million per year, which puts him second. He is now one of three current active head coaches with national championship titles, and he's along with Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney. And Kirby is number one on the pay scale at 13.3. Then it's Ryan Day at 12.5, and then it's Dabo at about 11.1. So this is Ross Bjork in Ohio State saying, Ryan, we know you're better than Dabo, but you still need that second championship to get over the Kirby Smart pay scale. And shoot, if they win another one in the next couple of years, this contract's going to be torn up, and he's going to be making $14 million or something like that over Kirby. But this was something we talked with Ross Bjork about at the championship celebration, that they were working on it. So, Kevin, you win a national championship, you get all kinds of clauses in your contract. Every kind of playoff win adds something. But when you win a title, it's like, well, that just means you get a new contract.
Yeah, if you don't get a new contract, then we haven't seen any evidence of that ever happening. But you're probably not in most favored nation status or something like that. And there was an era out there of where contracts were set up. It's like, I want to make $1 more than the next, the highest paid coach out there, and certainly an arms race with all of that, but certainly in a very comfortable tax bracket with all of that. And you're right. It is a situation of there's still plenty of upside out there for being able to go out and let's win another one, and we'll get a new contract set up for you at that point. And then, of course, too, I wonder what, things that maybe don't necessarily show up in the actual wording of the contract, like what your assistant coach pool of money is and things like that. Because while Ohio State is in the midst of replacing or elevating multiple coaches at this point, I think there are going to be some bumps that are going to be necessary there as well. So, that's always something you negotiate when you are at that table.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago Gene Smith said we're not going to get into the $1 million assistant coaches, and now it's almost to the point, if you're an assistant coach and not making $1 million, what's wrong with you? But Ohio State will still have some assistant coaches under that threshold as they work through all of these contracts. So this one for Ryan Day gets squared away, and that's done. We haven't talked to him yet. I assume once everything is done, we'll talk to Ryan Day and the new coaches maybe in a week or so. That's the hope. Yes, people asking, where's Tom? Tom, don't worry about Tom. Tom's fine. We don't need to always be talking about Tom. Jordan knows this. We don't always need to be talking about Tom. In fact, we hardly ever need to be talking about Tom. So thank you, McChickens. So then Ryan Day gets this squared away. Ohio State has not yet confirmed any of the offensive staff hirings. And I'm just reading the comments there from Jordan. With all this talk of new contracts, is there any way we can negotiate to pay Kevin negative money? There are ways, but the defensive addition is still yet to be resolved. And there's been some speculation and some rumblings on Joe Cullen at the Kansas City Chiefs defensive line coach. So don't expect anything from that until after the Super Bowl. But that's where we are right now. Still waiting for Ohio State to announce anything other than Ryan Day. And maybe this was the first thing they wanted to get done. And then they can start putting the other stuff out. But Kevin, would it be wise to bury this with the announcement of the hired assistants? Or does Ohio State want this to be out there for a day, and then tomorrow you can bury it with the announcements of the next assistants?
Yeah, I think you let this breathe for a little bit. I mean, obviously, Ryan Day is the face of the program. You were bringing back two of the top players in college football next season with Jeremiah Smith, with Caleb Downs. I mean, you're going to have your on-field faces, but this is your captain. This is the guy who speaks for your program. This is the guy who leads the program. I think you want to let this have a little bit of air, and then you worry about bringing in the official statements, especially on the ones that we all seem to know of the offensive moves and everything else. Tyler Bowen, all of that. I think you can sit there and do Friday. I mean, even with that, with having the Super Bowl on Sunday, and not that it's necessarily a Buckeye Fest in the Super Bowl as maybe it is in other years. I think it's best to just let this one breathe a little bit and then kind of worry about it, because I'm sure at Ohio State they know as soon as they make the announcements, hey Jerry, when can we talk to them? Hey Jerry, when can we talk to them? Well, until they announce it, they well, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. Talk to who? I mean, we haven't said anything.
What's a coach? Yeah, so maybe it just everything waits until next week when the entire staff is settled, and then it all gets announced, and then you can start moving from there. Kevin, you're talking about the expectations for next year. Have you seen the some of the win totals from FanDuel for 2025 already?
10.5 for Ohio State.
10.5 for Ohio State, for Oregon, for Notre Dame, and Penn State. Those are the only 10.5s out there. 9.5 for Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, and Clemson. You're not your Michigan, but the Michigan Wolverines 8.5, same as Indiana 8.5, which is pretty interesting. I mean, they are commensurate programs. I would agree with that. USC at 7.5. What about the Miami Hurricanes with Carson back at 8.5 now? Boy, that seems strange. They should be much higher than that.
That seems aggressive, though, still at 8.5. I mean, I know that the ACC is kind of a coin flip every single week. You could go out and beat Clemson and then lose to Wake, but I've not seen anything out of Miami, and I don't know, since 2002 that leads me to believe that they can do anything. So I'll take a look at a couple of those. The thing I hate about those win total bets getting in now is then the book holds your money for like 10 months. I mean, I could sit there and I'm not going to necessarily double my money by putting it in a mutual fund or something like that in that amount of time, but I hate them holding my money for that long, because I did get in on some of those bets last year, including Indiana over its win total last year, which of course did hit.
So I'm looking at Miami's schedule, for instance. They opened the season at home against Notre Dame. So
that's a loss.
They've got Florida at home as well in week 4. So it's Notre Dame, Bethune-Cookman, USF, Florida, off, at Florida State, off, Louisville, Stanford, at SMU, Syracuse, North Carolina State, at Virginia Tech, at Pitt. Like, none of these are unwinnable, but also for Miami, like 6 of these are definitely losable.
I was going to say, I mean, like 5 of those games, I think you said that they were all against, Wake, Carolina, A&I. I mean, all the same school or whatever. And yeah, they're going to split those games. So who knows? I mean, you have to have a story every year of somebody coming out of nowhere, but I think they're ineligible for that, because every year we build them up that they're back, and so they can't come out of nowhere. So we have jinxed them. They are, they have to start from square one to be able to do this, and we won't put them there.
And I'll be honest, we can get back to Ohio State. 10.5 is aggressive, I believe, especially when you consider the team they had won 10 in the regular season. And this is regular season win totals. And when you look at Ohio State's schedule, they do open with Texas at home, Grambling State, then Ohio, then an off week, then at Washington, which anything can happen, Minnesota at home, then at Illinois. Illinois is going to be a top 15, top 20 team, at Wisconsin. Everybody knows anything can happen in Wisconsin, even though they're not very good. Then they're off. Penn State at home, at Purdue. Do I need to say any more about Purdue? No. Then UCLA and Rutgers at home, and then at Michigan. So to me, I don't think it's like a slap in the face to say I'm going to take the under on this one. Like, how dare you say Ohio State's only going to win 10 games? Like, well, I just watched Ohio State win 10 games in the regular season this past year with a ridiculous amount of talent and a better schedule. And so now it's a tougher schedule. 10.5 seems like a lot. Like, not a lot, but it seems like too much.
It does. I mean, normally when you look at these lines, actually it's one, we're like, okay, it seems to fit. I mean, I could see it being, one toss-up game that could be determine it one way or the other. We'll get to August and we'll be doing our, pick your season totals or whatever. And of course I'll be like, 12-0. I mean, but right now it's really easy for me to sit there and be like, yeah, that just seems like a lot. But, talk to us after spring, after whatever this iteration of spring ball is. I mean, if Julian Sayin looks like, the second coming, and if, some of these defensive guys that have been waiting their turn are able to really step right in. But, yeah, I think that with recency bias of looking at last year's team and remembering that they went 10-2 in the regular season, it does feel, as we've said, aggressive.
So then let's talk about Michigan at 8-5 or 8.5. So they open with New Mexico, then they're at Oklahoma, then they've got Central Michigan, then they're at Nebraska. That could be a 2-2 start. Then they're off. Then they have Wisconsin at home. They're at USC. That could be a 3-3 start. Then they have Washington at home. Then they're at Michigan State. And then they have Purdue. Then they're off. Then they're at Northwestern. Then they're at Maryland. Then they're home against Ohio State. Those first 4 road games, I wouldn't be shocked at a loss in any of them. So would I parlay those 4? I'd get some pretty high odds, but I could also see them losing any of those 4, which means I could see them losing all 4. And if they do that, then there goes the 8.5. So I would, 2 years in a row going under that 8.5. Last year seemed like a pretty good bet. How do you feel about 8.5 this year with that Michigan schedule? Because I think it might be under again, especially with the quarterback situation being what it is.
I sent that one internally to one of our writers groups. I know you're in on that thread. When I was like, when the win totals came out, I was like, I'm naturally inclined to say the under, because I think that they have, they still have a lot of things that they've got to fix in terms of beating teams not named Ohio State, where they just have been able to psyop them for the last couple of years. Then I looked at the schedule and I'm like, I don't know. I think that I feel pretty good about them getting to 9 wins, to getting to 9-3. Do I feel good enough about it to put money on it? Hell no. I need locks here. I need locks, and I need immediate payouts. I don't need, this is like the opposite in both directions. But yeah, I think it is pretty close. I think this one is, you can have an easier argument either way. But I think 9-3 is kind of where I'm feeling it.
The Notre Dame 10, anytime you say 10.5, that just feels like a lot. And with three of these 4 teams that have 10.5 being in the Big Ten, that might be a little bit high, because they naturally take one down for everybody in the SEC basically. But if we look at Penn State, who has to come to Ohio State at 10.5, knowing they're going to lose at least one game they shouldn't, probably because of James Franklin. But let me bring their schedule up here real quick. And so they've got just a horrible, easy, insulting non-conference of Nevada, Florida International, and Villanova. And then they get a bye week. And then they have Oregon. Then they're at UCLA. Then they have Northwestern. Then they're at Iowa. Then they're off. Then they're at Ohio State. Indiana at home, at Michigan State, Nebraska at home, at Rutgers. So
all I heard was at Iowa. And you talked about, we know about Purdue. Well, I know about Kinnick Magic and what happens there too. They're good for one home upset every couple of years, and they didn't have it last year.
Yeah, I mean, so if we assume that Ohio State is going to hold serve and win that game in Columbus, which I think that's have I lost? There we go. I think that's usually a safe bet. You go with the home team basically. So if they can't lose any other games, like that Iowa one, I'm with you. That's a stretch of 4 straight games. They do have to go to UCLA. I'm not really too concerned about that, but that is after the Oregon game, so maybe that takes something out of them. And then the Iowa game is at the end of that stretch. But it isn't like I see Indiana at Penn State. That doesn't do really anything for me. I need to see Indiana again before I'm a believer. And even seeing Indiana last year, I don't know that they really gave us too much to believe in once we saw them in person against like teams, basically talent matchup type of games. They didn't necessarily hold up. But how do you feel about the Penn State Nittany Lions holding up to 10.5? Because I don't know where that second loss is going to come, but I feel pretty confident that it'll be there. Because again, I'm not a Drew Aller believer.
That's my big thing. I mean, everybody, and here we go. People are going to be like, "Oh, Noon just hates Penn State or whatever." No, Noon hates everything. So Penn
That's
State
right.
is part of everything. So that's where it comes from. But they're returning so much. They're this, this not even dark horse. Just this, horse favorite to win the national championship next year because of everything they're returning. But if you're returning a bunch of guys on a team that was, okay, I guess, who had a wonderful draw in the college football playoff and then still lost its first real challenging game in the playoff due to incompetence, in my opinion. Why should I suddenly feel like you're going to be competent this year? So I'm fading Penn State. Any way that I can fade Penn State, I'm going to fade them. I still think that they're going to win a bunch of games and everything else, but they're still going to have their problems in the big games. They're still going to run into some of these issues. I mean, because yes, you're bringing back both of your running backs. You tend to forget at times that you have 2 awesome running backs. You're bringing back your quarterback who's yet to completely have the lights on. It's on a dimmer switch, and it's been at about 65% most of the way. Will you be able to figure out that it's not just an up-down switch, but it's got a little knob on it? I'm not convinced of that. I mean, you lose Abdul Carter. I mean, yes, you do get Jim Knowles, but he's not in playing shape. I mean, he's going to be sitting there just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic in some ways. And I do think that there's some gains to be made, but I don't see a championship caliber team there. And, we're talking win totals. We're not talking winning the national championship, but I'm skeptical.
Yeah. I mean, remember, Ohio State was under their win total last year and they still won a national championship. So these two things can happen at the same time. And with Penn State, and I criticize Drew Aller, and people are like, yeah, but he doesn't have any receivers. Okay, does he have receivers now? Are there any receivers now? So if there aren't, then I'm going to continue to have my feelings on Drew Aller that I've said it before, and I think I posted this on the message board at Buckeye Huddle, presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus. Like the Ohio State sphere, I think to me is like the only group of people that see Drew Aller for what he is and what he's been. Everybody else sees him for what he could be and what he sometimes is on every 7th throw. But like that's not enough for me. And I haven't, he's a good scrambler. He's this, he's that, but he's not consistent enough. I don't think he scares anybody that is like anybody in Central Ohio, or I don't think he scares the Ohio State defense. And then of course I see the mention of Jim Knowles there, and it'll take him a couple of years. I don't expect the defense to get better right away. It got better right away at Ohio State because it was bad the year before. Penn State's defense wasn't bad this past year. So the basement, the floor is much higher than it was at Ohio State. So Jim Knowles right now is just going to try to keep Penn State where it is in year 1 and then improve it, because they've got to figure all of that out. And as it was mentioned, it was kind of a 3-year deal. And he said before, like his process is usually 4 or 5, but you don't have that time at Ohio State or Penn State, so they're going to have to speed it up.
Yeah, so you don't have Abdul Carter, as I said. That's a big issue. I mean, and Jim Knowles isn't going to be the guy out there on the recruiting trail, bringing these guys. He's not out there, buying the groceries. He's, a master chef and will be able to, cook them up and everything else. But, Abdul Carters don't necessarily walk through the door all the time. So it'll be interesting there, but I'm not buying Penn State whatsoever. So these win totals are a curious thing, and to kind of bring it back full circle a little bit, as a lot of people have joined us here recently. I mean, a lot of it comes down to head coaching, and Ryan Day being celebrated, being given a new extension on his contract, $12.5 million a year. That's a whole lot of moolah right there. James Franklin, he hasn't won anything. Not making $12.5 million a year.
James Franklin, I'm just scrolling through the list, 13th as of the start of the season, $8.5 million per year. But to bring it back all to Ohio State and the recruiting, and you mentioned Jim Knowles, and he was not a recruiter. I think what you're going to see with all of these hires that Ryan Day is bringing in, every single step, they're going to become better at recruiting that position. And that goes for Tyler Bowen on the offensive line, assuming Billy Fessler is the guy at quarterback's coach. He's a young, active guy. Chip Kelly, everybody knows him, and he recruited fine. But the real quarterback recruiter at Ohio State is Ryan Day, and then he's supplemented by his assistants. But offensive line will be better. The defense, whoever you're adding, is probably it's hard to be a worse recruiter than Jim Knowles. And I'm not saying he was a terrible recruiter. I'm just saying there's a baseline of recruiting ability, and you would expect that if you're bringing in somebody, it's going to be higher than that, because whoever you're bringing in, they're not going to be known as the best defensive coordinator, one of the top defensive coordinators in the nation like Jim Knowles was. So there's some give and take. And so with all of these guys bringing in, I'm fascinated to see what Ohio State looks like if they have an offensive line coach who can also recruit, because they've not had that since I don't know if they've ever had that, honestly.
I've said that on my show. I mean, who was before Bowman? I mean, Bowman couldn't recruit either.
So, I mean, he had a brew crew, but that was more of a Jim Tressel type of situation. But so you bring in, and I reached out to somebody about Tyler Bowen, and I guess the recruiting staff of Virginia Tech really, really high on him. So when the recruiting staff at your former school is high on you, I think that's a good thing, because we've all seen texts or reports from recruiting staff where they can be merciless on some position coaches if they don't recruit. And to get some good feedback on Bowen and his ability to recruit, I think is a positive sign. And they've got to lock up these 2026 Ohioans. And really, there's a lot of groundwork laid for the 2026 offensive line class. But Justin Fry had a tough time closing classes, and it wasn't just because of NIL. He's also having a tough time getting his foot in the door, keeping his foot in the door. And from what I've heard from the offense, from the Ohio guys, there just wasn't as much communication as they would have liked. And I would expect all of that communication to ramp up here once everything gets settled and they've got the new guy in town.
Yeah, coffee is for closers. So there was no coffee for Justin Fry, but then again, Jim Knowles drank all the coffee, and he didn't close any recruitment. So it'll be interesting to see, if these reports, first reported by Football Scoop out there, but it seems like that Tyler Bowen is going to be the move for Ohio State. What he's able to do as the offensive line recruiter. I mean, and the thing is, you look at Bowen's resume, and he's kind of been like a Swiss Army knife. He's coached at multiple different positions. Is this a case of where you're going to have to lean more on like a Tim Drevno or somebody like that to do some things in terms of, now that you can have assistants, assistant assistants and, QC coaches and everything else do more coaching or whatever? Because yes, Bowen was an offensive lineman. He's gone through it himself, but he's also coached a multitude of other positions. You wonder, are you giving anything away on the development side? Because development means so much, especially at offensive line, which, offensive line recruiting is such a crapshoot. There are way fewer sure thing offensive line, recruits out there than there are maybe at other positions. you would have to be really inept to screw up Jeremiah Smith. I mean, like legitimately, you'd have to go into a time machine and John Connor him at some point or whatever. But offensive line, I think needs that development.
Well, yeah, for sure. And I think it is crazy to give 5-star prospects on the offensive line everything they're asking for, because that's all wasted money in effect, because you're not getting anything out of that guy for 2 or 3 years if he's as good as you think he is. And like a David Sanders or whatever, getting the moon. Save the moon for the established players and the transfers, because you'll get your money's worth out of that more often than some 5-star who, like, you look at Alabama, they land 5 stars every year and they play them every year as freshmen. And it's like they're giving up sacks left and right and things aren't great. And Jalen Milroe's running for his life. That's what happens when you have to play 5-star freshmen or 4-star freshmen on the offensive line. You don't want to do it. It's nice to have them learning and get a year under their belts or something like that before they go. But like, I'm of the opinion, sure, you want somebody that is experienced, but like a Keenan Bailey could coach anywhere. Like, he could coach any position. It's just like having the eyes on all of the feet and the hands and the placements. Like, it's just needing that focused set of eyes and holding the players accountable and holding them to expectations and yet, but it's not just a one guy thing. Ohio State had 3 offensive line coaches last year with Justin Fry and Mike Soleni and Tim Drevno, and I would expect the same thing this year. So, you bring in Bowen, and who else you got? And as you said, Drevno, as far as we know, is still there. And then Mike Soleni left for UNLV, so they'll bring in somebody else there as well, because it does kind of take a village with the offensive line. And if one of those guys, your main guy is a very good recruiter, then that raises the floor as well. But then if he's not able to develop, then that's also a concern. But hey, I will say he recruited Tyler Warren as a 3-star, and that guy's going to be a 1st-round pick. Not saying that was Bowen, because he's been gone for a little while, but at least he's got an eye for the talent.
Yeah, identified that. Yeah. Jeff Johnson asking about the Joe Colin rumors. I mean, I will say this: Joe Colin is very distracted at the moment with a game to coach in on Sunday. So don't take the lack of conversation about anything there for anything other than the fact that he has duties to worry about at this point. I mean, the fact that we're talking about the question, there certainly are rumors. There certainly are rumors. I don't know really how much further to go on it, because I don't know what you don't know at this point. I mean, we certainly feel good on everybody talking about how the offensive side was going to shape up. We've heard the Colin rumors for a little bit now, but he was a name that I was talking about before they brought in Knowles. I mean, so it's just kind of crazy how these things kind of come around.
Super chat from Omar Austin. Do we take a step back offensively next season? Follow up. Tony, what can we do to get you to shave your head, grow a beard, and be a noon clone? Hashtag great look, Kevin.
Omar has to eat 3 jars of pickles.
Kevin, I don't know if you heard, but last night we have roped you into another eating challenge.
Oh, like hell you have. I didn't listen to the show. I wasn't invited to be on the show, so I did everything I could to counter program you guys.
So the challenge that you'll be partaking in is 1 spoon, and you've got a Wendy's chili and a Wendy's Frosty, and you just have to eat them both simultaneously. A spoon of Frosty, a spoon of chili. And Omar, we're going to get to your super chat, but as Jeff Spangler said, Kevin, I've tried the Wendy's chili Frosty. It's pretty good. You'll be fine. I think it'd probably be pretty good. So I think you'll be okay. No big deal. And it's relatively cheap. And again, all I asked for was $1.99 in super chats. Glasswing Butterfly sent in $50. So boom, got you locked in. That is awesome. Thank you, everybody.
No. I'm not your I'm not your little trained, the little monkey with the organ grinder, dude. I'm not your entertainment.
Well, we'll talk about it. Omar, does Ohio State take a step back offensively next season? Here's the thing, Kevin. Like offensively, Ohio State was the middle of the pack offense this past season, just because they weren't up tempo in the past years. They're always scoring over 40 points per game, and other than the Kyle McCord year. So, like, will they take a step back offensively? I don't know how they can't, because you're replacing Will Howard, who had the highest completion percentage in school history. You're replacing two running backs with over 3,500 yards rushing, and you're replacing Donovan Jackson and Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin. So you're losing a lot. Now, it's still Ohio State, so you're going to be one of the most talented teams in the nation. So what does a step back offensively look like? Is it, they could score more points per game, but be a worse offense just based on like tempo, or needing to score more because the defense is giving up more points, that sort of thing. But I still think they're going to be plenty fine offensively, even though you've got all of these new coaches in new roles, basically. So maybe there'll be a step back, but what does it look like in September? What does it look like in October, in November, December, and then January? As long as it looks a lot better in January than it does in August and September, I think you'll be okay.
Right. I mean, they could sit there and score more points and have more 3 and outs. I mean, because they may have to run their offense deeper into games because you're not putting teams away as early. So, I think we're probably going to see a team that isn't as efficient on third down, potentially. I think we're going to see a team that maybe a little bit more reliant on big plays, because they may not, especially early in the season, they may not be able to string together 10, 11, 12 play drives. Not that that's necessarily in Ohio State's offensive DNA right now. I mean, I think you're going to see more cases of where it's going to be a case of Jeremiah Smith getting loose and hitting Jeremiah Smith out there, or a situation where James Peoples makes 2 guys miss and 88 out the gate or something like that. But I think it is going to have to take a little bit of a step back to you have to do that to get kind of a running start. But as the year goes on, I think as the transfer offensive linemen, especially the big kid from Rice, as they kind of get into the system, the line solidifies. I mean, I think the line is going to really be the big launching point. Once the line is playing well, everything else is going to be fine, because you're going to have a quarterback back there, whether it's Julian Sayin or Lincoln Keenholz. Not really ready to put Tavian St. Clair in the mix. I think Tavian St. Clair is going to be like amazing once it all happens, but you just can't put it on a true freshman at that point. Once they feel that the protection is there and everything else, they're going to be able to do a lot more. So it's going to look very different in November than it is going to look in August, September. But to Omar's point, it is going to have to take a bit of a step back.
Well, even Josh Simmons, his first year, and granted he was a redshirt sophomore, it took him a while before he was good that year. Like, he had such struggles early on, and Ethan Onyanwa, who is a 5th-year senior, it's still a step up for him, and he's only played 1 year at left tackle after being a right tackle. So I think there's going to be similar growing pains, where there will probably be some times in September where you see him, and maybe that game against Texas, and it's like, oh boy, and what did Ohio State get themselves into? But also, this is not the first time he's played Texas. He's done it before, so this won't be an entirely new circumstance for him. Super chat from Doug Shepard. Hit the thumbs up, hit the like button, aka the thumbs up. We would appreciate that. Thank you, Doug, for that. Good reminder. Go ahead and hit that thumbs up if you do. We would appreciate it. And just looking through here, we don't need to go too much longer, Kevin. We wanted mainly to talk about the Ryan Day thing, and I think we've done that. Do we have any? We can finish through these starred
I was going to say, I think the stars are just the super chats go immediately in there. I mean, it's just a lot of here we go. From John.
Yeah.
Do you think we go up north next year and get that dub, get that win? I mean, I have not picked against Ohio State in any of the last couple of losses to them. So apparently my opinion on there doesn't mean diddly, because has something relaxed on Ryan Day because of the win of the national championship. Yes, he doesn't have this current streak that pressure is still on him, even though he does have a win against him. If you talk to your local neighborhood Michigan fan, whether he's changing your oil, delivering your newspaper, scooping up your dog poop, whatever Michigan fans do, he hasn't beaten Michigan. Well, that's not true. He has beaten Michigan as a head coach, but yeah, there is the current losing streak, and at no point have I sat there and said, well, Michigan's really just had the better roster. I mean, maybe 1 year you could say that they were very close or whatever. So is it, a psychological thing that's going to be relaxed because, I got the natty. I sat there and was able to get a lot of this stuff done. Maybe he doesn't have the comfortability of having Chip this year as his OC. I mean, you're going in. I think it's a lot easier to snap it on the road than at home because you can't take anything for granted on the road.
Yeah, it's the whole swing away mentality on the road where you can't. Like, they were very, very, very conservative in this game this past year against Michigan, assuming that would be enough to win, and it wasn't. And you're not going to take that same mentality. I mean, look at what happened in 2023, where Ryan Day's worst roster takes Michigan's best roster to the wire and loses by 6, and this past year they clearly did not think that Michigan had what it takes to beat them, and they were certainly wrong about that. And you're going to go into Ann Arbor expecting Michigan's best and Michigan to be their best and expecting all kinds of a fight. So it's going to be like a John Wick thing. You're packing all kinds of heat going into that game. You're preparing for anything. You've got brass knuckles, you've got brass toe knuckles. You've got everything because you need it. Whereas the game at home last year, it's like, yeah, I got a baseball bat by the door. I'm sure I'll be fine. And they weren't fine. So now they'll be loaded for bear, as it were. And will they win? I mean, it's going to happen eventually again. I mean, at some point you're going to get a win in there. And I'd say, well, Ohio State's definitely going to be better than Michigan, and that doesn't matter. We learned that this past year. Ohio State can be much better and still lose that game. But what does Michigan look like? Is Bryce Underwood the starting quarterback by that point because the incoming transfer quarterback has been ineffective? If they open their season 4-4 with the transfer quarterback, isn't it by that point? Don't you go to Bryce Underwood now? That way, he can have 4 or 5 games under his belt before he takes over the following season. I think by that point, this may be Bryce Underwood's like 3rd or 4th start. And is that a good situation for Michigan to be in, or is that better or worse for Michigan if Bryce Underwood is making his, say 3rd or 4th start as a Wolverine in that game?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, if you're an Ohio State fan and you're playing the long game, maybe it's better to sit there and not root as hard against Michigan early in the season, so they have to keep the transfer kid in there longer, and you're not going against Underwood, who certainly has the higher upside. But it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to follow along and see how that comes together, because at some point, does Michigan lose, for all of its, well, we don't put too much importance on this game or whatever, do the point that they really take their eye off the ball there, does stuff change? And okay, you can go back to 2-10-1 Cooper and everything else and in that situation, but I think we're well beyond that in terms of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, so Mikey Keene is the quarterback that they got from Fresno State, who has thrown for nearly 3,000 yards each of the last 2 years. Kind of Dylan Gabriel sized without Dylan Gabriel's mobility. I'm just looking at his numbers. He has never finished a season with positive rushing yards. So in his career, if I do this math quickly and correctly, he has rushed for about almost negative 390 yards in his career. So protect him and let him get rid of the ball quickly and see how it goes. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be fascinating to watch, and the build up for that one, clearly everybody looking forward to it. Under 300 days now, about 295 6 days, I believe, is the number thereabouts for the Michigan game. So I know everybody is ready for that one and looking forward to it. So just scanning these questions, see if there's anything else. Doug Shepard asks, has any college player been great after, and I just lost it. Has any college player been great after being overpaid before they ever play a game? Not yet.
It depends on your definition of overpaid.
Yeah. Like,
I know players that have made a lot of money coming right out of high school and who have lived up to it, who've been close to it. I mean, it's unfortunately there's not real hard data out there to sit there and create like a quotient of, overpaid and underperforming and things like that.
Like, is Nico Iamaleava overpaid? Like, he got Tennessee to the playoffs. Is Bryce Underwood overpaid? Yeah, he's going to be overpaid. David Sanders completely overpaid. Like, until they do something, then they're overpaid. Was Jeremiah Smith overpaid? Using that same logic, he was until he started doing something, and then he was completely underpaid. Once you saw,
and he had touchdowns in how many consecutive games to start
Right.
his career. So there was. I mean, maybe he was loafing during fall practice or something like that. But once the lights were turned on, he was not under.
But we even saw it in spring, and it was like he looked like Marvin Harrison as a senior in the spring when we saw him, and then in fall camp again. Like, he was never a true freshman. He's never been a true freshman. He's always been a fifth-year senior, and it's like, why don't you just go to the NFL already? He's like, I like it here. I like college. I think I'll stick around for 2 more years and then go dominate the NFL as long as he has a quarterback. And hopefully he goes somewhere where there is a quarterback. Unlike, so happy for Terry McLaurin now that he's finally got a quarterback, because he was stuck without one for years. And, Chris Olave and guys like that, you need that quarterback, and hopefully he gets one. Great comment here from the best damn pod in the land. Kevin with an exclamation point. Thank you for that. Really do appreciate comments like that.
Well, I always like punching through positive comments on me, and I'm going to just start blocking Jordan Kapler, because for whatever reason, he's determined that he's just going to be negative toward me. It's not my year. It's bull.
Just like it's the year of the tight end every year. Every year it is the year of Kevin. And hey, just because it says Kevin with an exclamation point, that doesn't mean it's positive. Just an FYI. Yeah, Jeff Johnson is true. No Ohio State podcast is complete without a Michigan troll. That is true. Although, they did get quiet for a little bit, but now they're starting to feel their oats again as they try to remain relevant in the 2024 season and into the 2025 season. So, Kevin, I think that's going to do it for us.
Yeah, I do. We're just shy of 45 minutes. I think that's a good Thursday effort right there.
Yeah. Hey, and don't expect a Friday effort. That's all I'm saying. So this is my Friday, and this is.
I was going to say I'll have a Big Me Kickoff live show on Friday. So just to fill your Friday fix, let's just say 3 p.m.
Perfect. We will see you all there. Before you go, if you could hit the thumbs up, and if you want to be notified when Kevin is going live, just hit the bell. And if you're watching on YouTube, and that will take care of that. Of course, continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We would appreciate you seeing you there. And if you would still like some championship confetti, we still have some. Become a member. There is a message there on the Buckeye Huddle message board on how to get some of that. If you would like some of that, we can get that out to you. So thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.